So this is day 14 of the Johnny Depp trial. Johnny Depp's team just rested their case yesterday, and defense Amber Heard's team just put up their first witness, which is Dr. Don Hughes, a forensic psychologist who, if you've seen it yesterday, is extremely biased. I've never seen such a biased witness. I mean, each side is going to have their witnesses that will be a little bit biased, but ultimately the experts are supposed to put forth their objective opinion based on their expertise. But if you listen to the testimony from yesterday, Amber Heard's psychologist is extremely biased. There was no objectivity in her testimony, as well as it sounded like gossip. It did not sound like the clinical opinion of an expert witness. It sounded like two women that were gossiping about a woman's allegations about abuse about her husband. It was um, just so alarmingly biased, unprofessionally. And then she kept referring to her notes, which was interesting, that she could not speak extemporaneously about the treatment, but she can sort of create this whole story about Johnny Depp being this abusive person. So that was interesting to see. And then towards the end, when court was down, when the judge adjourned until today, she was reluctant to hand over her notes, which was interesting. So I don't know what's in there that the plaintiff have not received, that Johnny Depp's team has not received, but they were very reluctant for her to share those notes. So that was interesting to see. So let's see if court, they're going to put their microphones on, and then we'll watch and see how the cross examination goes of her. So again, this is defense's first witness on the stand, Dr. Don Hughes, forensic psychologist. So the plaintiff's job at this point, Johnny Depp's team job at this point, is to discredit the testimony of the forensic psychologist, which will probably be a layup because she was so ridiculous and outrageous in her testimony yesterday. But we will see. I hope there's sound. I'm just going to add some guests. Let's see how this goes. Um, is court still down? Yeah, their mics are still off. So we're just watching day 14. So let me know. I don't know if I could do a live chat. Let me know what you think so far of the case. Do you think the forensic psychologist was compelling? Defensive forensic psychologist was compelling? Do you think she was over the top? Do you think she tilted the scales a little bit in favor of Amber Heard? Let me know what you think in the chat. Personally, I thought her testimony was extremely unprofessional, and it looks like she was handsomely paid to go up there and make that testimony. I mean, the people who are siding and witnesses for Amber here, we should all say a prayer for their careers, because who knows what's going to happen after this case is over, what will be said about their careers. So, again, this is day 14. So we're just waiting for court to resume. Let me just make sure. Okay, the sound. Plug this in. So they're having their sidebar before they resume. They're going over expectations of the day. Um, Amber Heard is likely to get to the stand today, but we will see. I'm sure she's nervous, um, especially because her witness went rogue in that ridiculous um, testimony yesterday. We will see. Okay, we have sound. So the introductions will begin. Also, um, Amber's attorney kept calling the forensic psychologist by the wrong name. That was hysterical. Freudian slip, or she could not get Dr. Curry's compelling testimony out of her mind because it was so compelling compared to the bizarre testimony of Dr. Hughes. That was so interesting. I think it was about 3 times that she made that mistake, that faux pas. Not a good look when you call your witness by the name of the opposing counsel's witness. Not a good look. And Dr. Curry was not bothered by it. She just sat there quietly and calmly and objectively, which is what you're supposed to as an expert witness. Let's see. Let's see. I'm trying to make the settings better. I'm going to do it's better. Here we are. The microphones are on. So, cross examination will begin. This should be interesting. I hope they roast her. I really do. I hope they roast her. So the cross examination will begin. The jury is coming in. Before we begin, I just want to make a note that I see how mainstream media is documenting and commenting on this case, and they are extremely biased toward Amber Heard, which is ridiculous to me, but not surprising at all because the mainstream media decides who they want to be the villain and who they want to be the victim all the time. So they don't have a stake in this, but apparently they want to side with Amber Heard, which is so interesting to see. I've seen so many headlines where they've mischaracterized how the day went, how the case is going. So it's interesting to see. And of course, they're 2 weeks behind what the rest of the world knows. I mean, as you could look from the comments from other live streams, people are almost unanimously supporting Johnny Depp because the evidence is so compelling that he has been defamed by his ex wife. So compelling. And again, the legal standard is not reasonable doubt because it's a civil suit. The legal standard is preponderance of evidence. So if there's a 51% chance of defamation, he wins. That's all he has to show. Whether or not there's a 51% chance that that article was defamatory and there was a likelihood or she acted with malice in putting forth these lies into the world, that's all he has to prove. All right, here we are. Hmm. She and her. Whew. Mm-hmm. Exactly. That's how you discredit a witness. Exactly. Her testimony yesterday was extremely biased toward women, and that's what it's presenting. She looks nervous. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does seem like she hates men. Hmm. She sent that yesterday. Mhm. Well, where else? Mhm. What? You can't. No, you can't. People lie. You can't.
Now, you testified that you approach a forensic evaluation with, I think you said it again today, a healthy degree of skepticism.
Correct.
All right. This skepticism didn't cause you to conduct interviews with, for instance, Laurel Anderson.
Right, I did not speak to Dr. Laurel Anderson.
And you chose not to speak to Dr. Laurel Anderson because you disagreed with Dr. Laurel Anderson?
That's not correct.
All right. What did Dr. Laurel Anderson do on behalf of Ms. Heard and Mr. Depp?
She was a couples therapist that they sought. They had 4 couples sessions. As I stated yesterday, one of them in which Mr. Depp stormed out of. She did have a long, evaluation or interview with Mr. Depp individually and with Ms. Heard individually. And then she saw them intermittently after the May 21st, 2016 incident, and when they were filing for divorce.
So you didn't interview Laurel Anderson, but you know what she did? How'd you figure that out?
Because we had her redacted notes and her deposition.
All right. And you understood from her deposition that Dr. Anderson didn't believe Ms. Heard to be a victim of spousal abuse?
I believe those were her words, yes.
And you also understood from her deposition that Mr. Depp had not had a very long history of being violent with any of his wife or women.
That she said that as well.
Yeah.
But that's something about Ms. Heard significantly triggered him. She talked about that as well.
And Dr. Anderson thought that Mr. Depp had been well controlled, I think for almost 20 or 30 years, correct?
Up until this point, I believe she said.
I know that you testified that you reviewed medical records.
Yes.
So, Ms. Heard had a personal nurse.
Correct.
Erin Filani.
Correct.
You didn't interview Ms. Filani either.
I did not.
She spent time with Ms. Heard on a regular basis during her relationship with Mr. Depp.
Correct. I had her clinical notes that I reviewed.
Right. And you reviewed her deposition testimony.
Correct.
Some of which the jury's heard, right?
I believe so.
Yeah. And you reviewed the nursing notes.
Yes.
So you know that Ms. Heard admitted to a history of eating disorders to Ms. Filani, correct?
I know that's in the notes. That's nowhere else in any other record, so I'm not sure where that came from.
But you relied on everybody else's notes.
And there are some things that I disagreed with, like I disagreed with Dr. Laurel Anderson about it being mutual abuse.
Right. So the stuff you disagree with, you disregard, and the rest you keep, correct?
Well, that's not correct.
But that's what you did.
That's not correct.
Right. You know that Ms. Filani saw Ms. Heard immediately after she returned from Australia.
I'd have to look at the notes again to be sure, but I know she did see her when she came back from Australia. That's correct.
Did Ms. Filani document any injuries to Ms. Heard in her notes?
I did not see that in the record.
Okay, so you looked at her notes, and there's no injury to Ms. Heard documented in her nurse's notes following her return from Australia.
Correct.
Okay. You talked about this concept, which you then defined, lethality. And you testified there are certain factors in their present relationship where a woman ends up murdered by her partner.
Correct.
And that's one of the ways you look at as to whether a woman is in a very dangerous situation.
Correct.
Can we pull up PX92? So, yes, it's published to the journal.
Yeah, it published.
what this is?
I believe this is the knife that Miss Heard gave to Mr. Depp as a gift.
All right. And you speak Spanish?
Un poquito.
Do you know what it says?
Yes, it says hasta la muerta, till death.
So a woman you suggest has characteristics of being afraid for her life gives her intimate partner a large knife, which she has inscribed until death. That's your testimony?
Well, there's context.
Okay. We can do that later. So you talked a little bit about Mr. Depp purporting to demonstrate jealousy with Ms. Heard. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
And you specifically talked about Mr. Depp displaying jealousy regarding the actor James Franco.
Correct.
The very first time you met with Ms. Heard, she talked to you about Ms. Franco, or Mr. Franco, James Franco, correct?
I don't know if it was the first time, but I did ask about some other relationships.
Okay, so why don't we do this? Let's go PX 1246. I just want to go to the first page. So, do you recognize the document that's in front of you?
Yes.
All right. And what I would like to do, what is it?
It's a top sheet of a background information questionnaire that I use to help guide the evaluation.
Okay. So, now, this is, who filled it out?
I filled it out.
Whose form is it?
My phone.
I'm going to move just the first page into evidence because we're going to talk about other portions of it later.
Could you back us so she was for the first page? Any objection? Okay.
We will admit the whole thing in evidence.
You want the whole thing in evidence?
Sure.
No objection. All right, 1246 in evidence in favor. Okay. Are there any identifiers that need, or we're just going? Yeah, I'm sure there's going to be some. All right. Okay, so you'll be redacted one, correct?
I don't know what the nature of the redactions are going to be, but
okay, we can discuss it. Okay, thank you. All right.
1246 has been moved into evidence. Can we blow up the bottom right hand corner?
You want to publish to the jury?
Yeah, let's publish it to the jury. Okay, they don't.
Or we can. Why don't you?
I don't see anything on the first
If
page.
you want to look at that, any objection to that? That's what we're going to show.
That's what we're going to show.
All right, publish the thing.
Right. So this is the bottom corner, your notes. And it's under the section of your notes that's entitled Intimate Relationships.
Correct.
And one of the notes here on the right says JF, that's James Franco, right?
Correct.
Got close but really wanted to be with Johnny.
It says you have friends. They were friends.
All right. It said friends, but you put them under intimate relationship.
Well, there's a line there because I was asking specifically about other things that were allegations in this matter.
There's a line there because you did not believe that they should go under intimate relationships by the time before.
She wasn't telling me that this was an intimate relationship. I queried as to what's going on with James Franco because that was something that was raised in this case.
And there's a note for December 2015.
When they became more friends, more friendly.
Right. And that was a period of time in which Ms. Heard was married to Mr. Depp, correct?
Correct.
So she became close with Mr. Franco in December 2015, and at least you put it under intimate relationships.
with a line differentiating another part of this document.
Okay. Did you provide another header? Like a header that says friends?
No.
No. Well, let's look at the next one. The next one says, I think it says Elon.
Correct.
It's Elon Musk, right?
Correct.
All right. May 2016.
Correct.
Met Ball.
Correct.
That's a big fancy party in New York, right?
Yes, it is.
All right. And she said she dated him after John.
Correct.
She met Elon Musk in May 2016. When did she file the TRO?
The last answer was May 21st. I believe it was May 26th, 27th. I'm correct.
When did she start dating Elon Musk?
Sometime after that.
Sometime after the TRO?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. You talk. We can take that down. You talked quite a lot yesterday about this concept of reactive violence.
Yes.
Yeah. Just so I understand your position on this, is it your position that if Miss Heard was abused, she gets to hit Mr. Depp?
That's not my opinion.
But you know she hits him, right?
And I testified to that.
Right. And how many times do you believe that she told you that she hit him?
Do I believe that she told me, or how many instances were there?
Well, I don't know. How would you know other than her telling you? You weren't there, right?
I was not there. That's correct.
All right. How many times did she admit to hitting him?
She indicated a number of times in a number of instances.
You indicated that you had listened to audio recordings as part of the work you did in this case?
That's correct.
All right. I'd like to play you a portion of one of those recordings. It's Plaintiff's Exhibit 343. It's already in evidence. And for the record, the portion I want to play is 2 minutes 46, 246.01 to 247.20.
I said to Travis, I said to you, hey, tell Travis what just happened.
You told me to do it. You told me to. You said, go do that.
I said, no, tell him what just
And
happened.
I lied.
And then you punched me in the
You're right.
fucking thing. And
You figured it out.
And you said, what the fuck are you talking about? And I want to see why. And then
I didn't punch you, by the way. I'm sorry that I didn't hit you across the face in a proper slap, but I was hitting you. I was not punching you. Babe, you're not punched.
Don't tell me what it feels like to be punched.
You know, you've been a lot of fights been around a long time. I know.
No, when you fucking have a close.
You didn't get punched. You got hit. I'm sorry I hit you like this, but I did not punch you. I did not fucking deck you. I fucking was hitting you. I don't know what the motion of my actual hand was, but you're fine. I did not hurt you. I did not punch you. I was hitting you.
How are you?
What am I supposed to do? Do this? I'm not sitting here bitching about it, am I? You are. That's the difference between me and you. You're a fucking baby.
Because you started.
You're such a baby. Grow the fuck up,
You started
Johnny.
physical fights.
I did start a physical
Yeah,
fight.
you did, so I had
Because-
to get the fuck out of it.
Yes, you did. So you did the right thing, the big thing. You know what? You're admirable.
You agree with Ms. Heard that it's admirable to retreat from a fight?
Is it admirable? It is admirable to retreat from a fight.
Yeah. Anything about this tape suggest to you that it's characteristic of reactive violence?
In this instance, if true, if she said she hit him first, then that would not be reactive violence.
You testified that Ms. Heard reported to you that she engaged in low levels of violence, correct?
Well, I don't think she said that. I think that was the characterization of knowing the types of minor and severe levels of violence.
Okay,
minor
I
violence.
got it wrong. You consider low levels of violence.
Well, I consider what the literature and the research talks about low levels of violence as opposed to severe levels of violence.
And I think you suggested that Ms. Heard sustained more severe injuries, correct?
I think I said more frequent injuries.
More frequent, but not more severe.
Well, certainly the incidents in Australia and the sexual violence and the incidents on December 15th, 2015 were quite severe.
You said you reviewed medical records in rendering your opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
And you reviewed photographs.
Correct.
Now, other than the reports to her therapists, which you call medical records, right?
Yeah, I would call those medical records, sure.
Other than the reports to her therapist, there's not a single medical record that reflects any injury to Ms. Heard, is there?
That's not correct.
There is a then what doctor reflected injuries to Ms. Heard?
The note by Erin Borum, her married name, Falat and married name, indicated that she was headbutted by Mr. Depp and that she went for a concussion check and she had a busted lip and then she went to Dr. Kipper's office in order to get checked.
What? And there's a medical record other than that note that reflects it?
There's a note that she showed up at Dr. Kipper's office. There's a note in the similar 2 days that Dr. Laurel Anderson saw the 2 bruises from that same incident as well.
All right. You reviewed photographs.
Yes.
I'd like to put up PX 144. It's been published to the jury briefly. I'm going to keep it up very briefly. That photograph doesn't reflect a low level of violence, does it?
Well, that reflects a severe injury, I would agree.
Yeah. Why don't we go to PX 145? That's a severe injury that ended up with Mr. Depp on a gurney, correct?
That is a severe injury, correct.
There. Is it your testimony that throwing a can of mineral spirits at your spouse is characteristic of reactive violence?
If you are running away from your spouse who is trying to hurt you, yes.
So you can throw a can of mineral spirits. What about if you throw a can of Red Bull?
Again, it depends on the incident I think that you're referring to. That was not necessarily reactive violence. That was in a state of frustration or anger.
So when you throw a can of Red Bull in a state of frustration or anger, that's not reactive violence.
No.
What about if you throw a bottle of vodka because your husband fell off the wagon? Is that reactive violence?
Are you asking me hypothetically?
I'm asking you, would that be a characteristic of reactive violence? Throw a bottle of vodka because your husband fell off the wagon.
If it's in the middle of an assault, perhaps. If it's independent of that, no.
Right. So, for instance, if your husband was just having a couple of shots at the bar.
Again, you would need more information and context to make that determination.
That's reflection of violence. I agree with you. Throw the bottle. That's not reactive violence.
If somebody's throwing multiple bottles, again, psychological violence and abuse is psychologically destabilizing, which destabilizes individuals' coping strategies. That is absolutely true.
Lost what's true. Is it your testimony that once you've thrown one bottle and missed, when you throw the second one, now it's reactive?
That's not what I'm saying. I don't think throwing bottles is acceptable in any context.
ask you about some of the testing that you did. One of the things that you did was a form called a CTS2 relationship behaviors.
The conflict tactic scale, correct.
So CTS2 stands for conflict tactic scale.
That's correct.
And this is one of the documents that you had with you on the stand yesterday.
I had all my testing with me, all my clinical notes from my evaluation with Ms. Hurd.
And you gave me a copy of it because you looked at it during the testimony.
Because you asked me, so I gave it to you, yes.
Right. All right. But you have a good recollection of what that test is about, the CTS2 test.
I have a very good memory and a very good recollection. I want to give the jury the most accurate and thorough information. After having done 12 tests with so many questions, I wanted to just be as accurate as possible. I'm sure my memory would miss some things that might be relevant.
All right, so let's talk about the CTS2. It's dated 9/26/2019.
Correct.
9/26/2019. And it goes through and it asks a whole series of questions about what you've done and what your partner has done.
That's correct.
There's tons of these questions.
Correct.
And every single one of those questions is preceded by the same question, right? How often did this happen in the past year?
Correct.
You knew that as of 9/26/2019, not a single one of the things that Ms. Hurd identified happened to her in the last year.
Correct. She was oriented to a different time frame to get a checklist of those behaviors.
And one of the although it says, please, how often did this happen in the past year? One of the questions is, my partner used force to make me have oral or anal sex.
Correct.
She went with 0 on that, right?
I'd have to see if you'd like to show me.
You have any recollection that she didn't go with 0 on that?
I have a recollection at that point in time, she was framing those type of acts as angry sex. She wasn't framing them as physical force, as most women don't on these measures.
And you helped her to reframe it as something other than angry sex, didn't you, doctor?
My job was not to do treatment. My job was to do an evaluation, and that's what I did.
All right. Evaluation. And one of the evaluations you did and one of the diagnoses that you ultimately made relates to PTSD.
That is correct.
All right. And you diagnosed Amber Hurd with PTSD long before you made use of the gold standard test for PTSD.
That is correct. And I make the diagnosis of PTSD in my clinical practice without using the CAPS all the time.
All right. So just like you and I are on the same page, and I think we are, this gold standard test that I'm referring to is the CAPS-5.
That is correct.
That's the one that Dr. Curry administered, correct?
Correct.
You didn't administer the CAP-5 until after you'd already diagnosed Amber Hurd with PTSD, right?
She had PTSD in 2019. She had PTSD in the beginning of 2021 when I evaluated her. And then she had PTSD in December 27, 2021 when I administered the CAPS. That's correct.
All right. I think I asked a much more narrow question than that. You didn't diagnose, you didn't give the CAPS-5. I'm going to strike that question altogether and start it again. You had already diagnosed her with PTSD before you did the gold standard, correct?
Before I administered the CAPS-5, there was enough data in the psychological testing and my clinical evaluation to establish that she met criteria for PTSD. That is correct.
All right. you submitted an expert disclosure in this case on January 11th, 2022.
I believe the attorney submitted that disclosure, yes.
You participated in that?
In the January 11th, it was the same disclosure that went before. There were no changes on that.
Did you reference the CAPS 5 in that at all?
I don't believe I gave the results of the CAPS 5 to the attorneys at that point.
All right. You met with, I got dates here. This time I'm using the cheat sheet. All right. You met with Amber Heard on September 26, 2019.
I would love to have my cheat sheet, but I'll take your word for it.
I'm sure you will.
I'll share.
Thank you.
October 11, 2019. When did you give the CAPS 5?
The CAPS 5 was administered the last time that I saw Ms. Heard. I saw her over, as stated multiple times, over the past 2.5 years, and having not seen her in about a year to get an accurate assessment of her current symptoms, having had all the background information, the CAPS 5 is a great structured clinical interview to do that.
All right. So you hadn't seen her for about a year before you gave her that test.
That is correct.
And you did it over Zoom.
That is correct.
Why don't we pull up PX 1247? This one. Okay.
Sure. It's just the witness right now. So. Okay. Okay.
Sure. You could, Dr. Hughes, you can actually help with that question. This is like more than 20 pages long.
It's about 20 pages.
Right. This is a series of questions that you use to test for PTSD.
Correct.
And you recognize the first page. This is the first page that you filled out. That's your handwriting.
That's correct.
I'd like to publish the first page to the jury.
Do you wish to have evidence? You're moving it into evidence?
Yes, I am.
Well, he's just publishing the first page. Any objection to the first page? Okay. First page in evidence. Could you put your microphone on? I'm just having. I don't have the ability to scroll down, so I can't see this. Oh, I'm sure they'll get you a copy of it.
If you go to the second page. Can we put up the second page?
Are you putting the second page into evidence?
Not yet.
I can't put it up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'd like the witness to see the second page.
Witness can see the second page.
Thank you. This is the second page. This is instructions on how you do it.
Correct.
All right. And then we'll go to the third page. Let's let the witness see the third page. Now this is entitled scoring.
Correct.
So when you score, you look at two things, right? You look at frequency and intensity.
Correct.
All right. Those are the two factors you use to score.
Correct.
All right. Can we go to the fourth page of this document and just show it to the witness? So, Dr. Hughes, this is the first page of the CAPS B where, other than the identifying information, where there's any input into the document, correct?
The CAPS 5, you said the CAPS B?
Yeah, I misspoke.
Okay. Yes. This is the the criterion A, which means that in order to, as I said yesterday, to obtain a diagnosis of PTSD, you have to have sustained a very specific traumatic event. That's the first thing to get through the door.
All right. So, I'm gonna. I'd like to be able to get them a copy of this. Is it too early to take the break?
A little bit, if you
All right, we can do that. Okay. All right. So, you recognize the first page or the fourth page of this document,
Yes, I do.
and the handwriting on the fourth page is yours.
It's all my handwriting.
The entirety of it is yours. I'm going to move this document into evidence along with the first page, and that one is. I think it is
You're still on 1247.
1247.
Okay, so you want to move the entirety of 1247 in.
Yes.
Do you have a copy of 1247? It's Exhibit 1247. Well, I mean, do you have plaintiff's exhibits 1247? I think it's 1247.
Oh, it's defendant's 1435.
1435. Defendant's 14.
Take your time.
Did you want to take a look at the court's copy? Would that be easier for you?
It's 59 pages. What is he moving in?
I think he's moving in. Are you moving the entire document in?
Yeah, I'm going to move the entire document.
Defense is nervous about the evidence, which
I don't
is
think I have an
weird.
objection to that.
No objection? Did you want to take a look at the court's copy, or you're good?
Yeah, I would.
They're so nervous about her notes.
Thank you, Jamie.
It's like, what are they avoiding seeing? They're so reticent about the notes. It's interesting.
No objection.
All right, so even though I pulled it from defendant's 1435, we want to make this 1247 plaintiffs, correct?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
I'll just write my
I kind of need it. Thank you. We'll just change the number on it. All right. So it's 1247. I said, okay. 1247 in evidence. Plaintiff's 1247 in evidence. And now it can be published to the jury.
Thank you. Why don't we publish the fourth page where we're talking about? All right. So, what this references is the event you said was the worst. And what you have filled in here is 3 words. IPV by Johnny, right?
Correct.
Right. And then what happened is the next box, and you've not written a single thing in the box, right?
Because I've already spent 20 some odd hours with Ms. Hurd, I know what goes in that box. If you look at the top, it says administer the life check checklist or an other structured trauma screen. That screen had already been conducted.
Right, but there's a box on the gold standard test that asks what happened, and it says, how old were you? How were you involved? Who else was involved? Was anyone seriously injured or killed? Was anyone in life danger? And none of that information you provide in your analysis on the CAPS file.
I hesitate to object, but that's very valid.
It is.
I'll sustain the objection if you want to rephrase.
We can do it
Okay.
the slow way. The first question is, how old were you?
All of the information that would go in that box is contained in my 80-plus clinical notes of my evaluation of Ms. Heard up until this point. It would have been incredibly redundant to do that again here.
But you knew other people would review this, didn't you?
And I knew that they would have my clinical notes as well.
Oh, so they're supposed to parse through your clinical notes so that they can figure out what you chose to be the anchoring event.
I didn't choose to be the anchor. The client chooses to the anchor to identify what the worst event is for them.
You wrote IPV by Johnny. That's what you determined to be the anchoring event.
When I asked Ms. Heard, once again, of the traumatic events that she experienced in her life, which one is the worst, this is what she indicated.
Okay. But you provided no details with respect to it.
There are a plethora of details in my 80-page is a handwritten, single-spaced clinical notes.
All right, let's go to the next page. All right. You felt it appropriate to fill this page out, didn't you, Doctor?
Well, these are the questions about the symptoms, so I'm asking specific questions and getting her responses.
Didn't you know this already?
I was making sure at this point, having not seen her for a year, what is the trauma expression at this time? It can change over time. It could go away. It can get better. It can get worse.
All right. Let me go a couple more pages in. Let's go into page 7 of 20. Now, there are a couple of boxes that you filled in on this. Let's look at item 5, B5. You don't provide any indication of what kind of reminders trigger these reactions.
She answered that on the previous questions.
Right. And you didn't provide any answer as to how long does it take to recover.
She has some difficulty recovering.
Okay. And then there's this question that says, how often has this happened in the past month? Number of times.
Correct.
And we talked about how these things are scored, and we looked at, you got to look at frequency and intensity, right?
Correct.
And you left the frequency box blank.
Oh, no, if she said several times a month, then that's what the frequency is.
And you didn't fill that frequency box in at all.
Because she told me it was frequently several times a month, which is one of the anchors encoding the CAS.
All right, so let's look at the next one.
So why didn't you write that? Frequently.
The very next box.
On average, a monthly average. Why didn't you ask that?
Again, this is scored by frequency and intensity. How often in the past month? Blank.
Pardon?
How often in the past month? You left that one blank, right?
She tells me it happens at least twice a week, so certainly I could multiply 2 times 4 and put an 8.
And you certainly could have written the number 2.
But it wasn't 2. If it's happening 2 times a week.
All right, so 2 times a week times the number of months. Now you got 2 digits instead of 1, right? That's all it took to write that down.
This is in a 1-month period, so it would have been a 4-week period.
So
How often in the past month? That's what it says.
Correct. You
You
said
chose not
months.
to answer that question. Let's look at the next page. Again, scoring is frequency and intensity. How often in the past month? Again, you left it blank.
If you look on the right-hand box, that is where we are indicating the frequency and the severity. If you can see where I circled moderates happening more than twice a month, that's where I am indicating the frequency of the symptom expression.
Okay. But aren't you skipping a step? You're supposed to do intensity and frequency.
And when somebody says it's happening more than twice a month, that is a frequency indicator.
All right. Let's go to the next box. Again, have, in the past month, how many of the important parts of event have you difficulty remembering? Number of important aspects. Didn't fill it.
Well, I listed 2 specific incidents of where she indicates she has important aspects that are missing.
But all you had to do was put a number in here. You knew how to score this thing.
Well, this measure actually doesn't get scored by the frequency.
All right, you know something, you're right. Let's look at the next one.
I know.
The next one gets scored by the frequency. That's blank, right?
Well, I did not code it as a PTSD symptom.
Okay, let's go to the next one. How much of the time in the past month have you felt that way as a percentage?
So as you can see, I circled 20 to 30% of the time.
Right.
It's just as if I'm putting it on the right side in the box where I'm coding the instrument.
We're going to talk about the right side. You took issue with the way that Dr. Curry did this testing.
Correct.
Right. But your test, in every instance where you're asked the number of times and to fill in the blank, you leave it blank.
They're on the right side of the document.
All right. You want to talk about the right side of the document? Let's do that. After you did the CAPS 5 for the anchoring, the 3-word anchoring event, IPV by John, you went back through again and said, maybe I should consider childhood trauma as well, right?
I wanted to test for the limits and see at this point in time, Ms. Hurd had a child, and sometimes when people have children, their trauma gets evoked. Is she having those symptoms as well? She already had, based on this instrument, the PTSD from the interpersonal violence. I wanted to see if there were any additional symptoms.
All right. And you knew that she had severe child abuse as a young person.
That is correct.
She grew up in a home full of heroin addicts, right?
Opiate abuse, yes.
Yeah. And then there was IPV between her parents.
Correct.
And so you wanted to make sure that there wasn't some impact with this childhood trauma in the diagnosis of PTSD.
Yes.
Right. And so you decided to give her the test again.
Well, I didn't give it again. What's called testing the limits. I went back to some of the questions where she answered in the affirmative and said, and is this also happening vis-a-vis your childhood abuse? Are you also having intrusive thoughts and feelings about childhood? Are you avoiding thinking about things about childhood? Is that happening for you now as well?
All right. So there are a series of notations on the right-hand side. Let's go to page 5 of 20 in the test. All right. Why don't we highlight the right-hand notations and start under the word childhood? All right. So the way you tested for childhood PTSD is to write a notation in the corner and answer a couple of questions. Same test.
Well, I wasn't administering a whole CAPS again. What I was doing was seeing, as we know with people who have what we call polyvictimization or re-victimization, someone could, in fact, meet criteria for the PTSD from the domestic violence, but then they're also experiencing some symptoms as a result of the childhood abuse. Both can occur.
Right. But Mr. Depp isn't responsible for her childhood abuse.
That is correct.
And the way you tested this childhood abuse PTSD is you made notations on the right-hand column of a form that you partially filled out for the IPV by Johnny, right?
Well, I disagree with the partially filled out. The frequency was clearly filled out in the box where we score the CAPS. But yes, I did write about the childhood to the right of that box.
Okay. And that is the appropriate way that the PTSD for childhood trauma should be administered.
If there were affirmatives and I needed to go further, I could have administered another CAPS 5. There were not. I need to do that.
Okay. So you chose not to do a second CAPS 5, although you knew that she had suffered from severe childhood trauma.
No, because she wasn't suffering symptoms at that point in time, these symptoms from the childhood trauma.
Now, how does she know that? So what he's pointing out is that she didn't administer the test.
Just so you're moving to a different topic now, of course. Okay, all right, this might be a great time to take our morning break then. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll take our 15-minute break. Please do not discuss this case with anybody, nor do any outside research, okay?
Okay, so they're taking mid-morning break. What Johnny Depp's team is saying is that she did not administer the test appropriately because there were certain indicators that she was supposed to follow and then go on to the next steps of the test. And she did not administer it. So she sort of made her own call based on her own determination.
Yes. Yes.
May I get a copy of the exhibits from them?
Yes. I don't know if we're going to do it before, but we'll certainly get it to you.
Well, I need to be able to redirect, and I have never seen these.
Okay, we'll go through it. That's fine, all right?
It's although it's in your exhibit.
That's
Well,
fine.
if it's in my exhibit list, then just tell me.
Telling you the exhibit numbers, that's fine. We'll work through it, okay? Let's take a recess till 11:40 then, okay?
Thank
All
you.
right, okay, 11:40.
Okay, so she did not administer the test appropriately. But apparently, it measures the intensity. She's onto the PTSD test. So I'm not positive of how the test looks, but he's discrediting how she applied the test to Amber's experience and saying that she did not administer appropriately, and because she had other factors based on abuse, that have triggered a second application of the test. Again, I'm not an expert in psychology. That seems to be the conclusion that she's drawing, and that she made her own arbitrary determination based on the first PTSD, saying that she didn't have symptoms of her childhood abuse in that moment, which is interesting. How did she make that determination to foreclose the symptoms of childhood abuse, to say they're not acting out in that moment, therefore I don't need to do a follow-up test? Sounds like she made an arbitrary call, or she wanted to narrow in that this is the abuse and there's no other indicators of abuse other than the abuse alleged from Amber. So that seems to be what she's doing. She wanted to narrow it down to this. So again, I'm going to log off now and end this stream. Leave your comment section. Let me know how you think day 14 is going. And let me know what you think of the cross examinations. All right, so I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.